think there was a lot of interest except for the part where you said it depends.
Question to Markus. Actually, it's very exciting to hear about all this new compressor for the hydrogen. Just from the fuel safety and insurance perspective point of view, like if you compare this compressed hydrogen with the liquid hydrogen, cryogenic hydrogen, because that one also has a very high energy content, and as a fuel itself can be also a very good alternative because the cooling technology, its efficiency is also improving along with the storage. Where do you see it? Because gases, hydrogen, like it's a reducing gas, like the sealing at these high pressures, that can be a problem. So as a fuel itself, like where do you see
like gas hydrogen versus liquid hydrogen?
Yes.
Okay, so I would say the one technology. Well, there's not going to be a one size fits all type of approach here, but the easier the fuel is produced and the lower the more normal the pressure and the temperatures, the more it will be deployed. So for most of the applications, if we're talking about trucks, buses, and even railways, standard 350 bar gas hydrogen will be enough. Can they run on liquid hydrogen? Yes, they can. Liquid hydrogen has two things that need to be considered in contrast to compressed gas hydrogen. The one thing is, it is fairly expensive to produce because it's really at low temperature, really low. And the second thing, because of this low temperature, it's probably only get used in vehicles that are constantly moving, because you cannot have it standing around, because then you have boil off and all that type of things. So where we see companies working on with liquid hydrogen is for marine, for ship applications, because then that's continuously moving and the energy density makes sense. And we also see one or the other truck manufacturer working on liquid hydrogen, but even there is like 2-3 types of technology in parallel, and I think there's kind of an internal competition which one is going to step into the commercialization phase. Is that answering your question? Thank you.
A question for Anthony. I mean, the production cost of green hydrogen is pretty high, right? It's not cheap. I know the IRA helps, but going forward, what is the industry, including Nel, is doing to reduce the cost of electrolyzers, for example? In that regard, I'd like to say that oil-scale ammonia plant, right, say 4,000 ton a day, will require about 300 electrolyzers, right? So is any work being done to reduce the number of electrolyzers by increasing the capacity of each electrolyzers, plus any other improvements cost-wise that you guys are working on?
Yes, our R&D group works. Our R&D group actually works with the Department of Energy, which works with the other R&D groups for our competitors to kind of collectively establish goals for reducing the electrical input, increasing the efficiency of the cell stacks. And that's done through the physical structure of the cell stacks themselves, adding more cells, thinner membranes, better anodes. So there's a lot of technology development that's going in to try to make the cell stacks more efficient. But I did mention before, I think there's a point of diminishing returns that we're approaching. Not that quickly, but it is approaching, where you're only going to be able to reduce the amount of electricity that's needed by so much. So it is imperative that the cheap electricity continues through whatever subsidy is needed. But one of the other things that is really being pushed on is to reduce the CapEx cost by, I had mentioned before, trying to containerize, modularize, reduce the building footprint, reduce the building completely, and try to minimize the CapEx cost to try to offset that OpEx a little bit. But as you mentioned, currently the only way to get to a 4,000 ton a day, plant is to have 300 electrolyzers, and that's currently kind of what they're doing in modularization, and that's really the focus of all the EPC FEED studies as well.
More questions?
So I have a question from both of your point of views, is that IRA also has some local content and local value chain implications. So how does that impact you, Markus? And then how does it impact you, Anthony, if the electrolyzer does not end up in the US? Does that have any implications on the tax credits that you can claim? Versus what does the value chain for you, Markus, looks like?
I think over the last 2 to 3 years, we've seen a pretty significant change from government subsidy funding being absolutely required at an FID to being, this funding will happen one way or the other, whether we need to take out some sort of a debt instrument. So I think what we're seeing is that there's a lot less hesitancy to just make sure that you're moving forward one way or the other. And currently, because of the limitations in cell stack manufacturing capacity across the board, in order to get in line, you actually have to have been at an FID. So there are a ton of people coming around to kick tires and ask questions, and I may have some government funding that I'm working on. So we get a lot of that, and we try to filter out as much of that as possible and say, do you have a backstop? And if you do, then we can talk about it a little bit more.
Related to locally producing, yeah. So we are pretty sure that let me say it's two phases. At the beginning, in the startup phase, what we see is that as long as technology is not readily available, governments also accept importing technology. So, and that is also true for Asian countries. On the mid to long run, we know very well, and even aside of governmental subsidies, that we have to package, produce in the region for the region, because first and foremost there's a logistical element, there's a standards element, and last but not least there's a customer expectations element and being reactive to the different markets. But obviously there's going to be a trade-off between the volumes and the business volumes available and the ability to produce setups in various regions. But we already are thinking today, how can we build up a setup to serve the US market, and what's going to be the play in the Asian markets? And there is not an Asian market. There's maybe 3 or 4 different countries in Asia that will have that same requirement.
To kind of actually, maybe I misunderstood the question a bit, but Nel is a bit agnostic because we actually manufacture in Europe and in the US. So both divisions make equipment that's readily transferable to each one. So we have US and EU rated equipment. However, there are some, as you mentioned, some emerging markets like Australia, South Africa, Canada, where to some extent, to some extent, especially with the hydrogen codes and certifications, they haven't been written yet. And if they are being written, they're a little bit vague. So, just trying to get new equipment brought into a new country and certified has actually been a pretty onerous process, where it's not quite as straightforward as these are the rules you need to follow. It's kind of chasing a moving target.
Excellent. So we'll start wrapping this up then. I obviously want to thank the panel, but then we are also wrapping the ADI forum up. I want to again thank our partners, Hoerbiger, MAN Energy Systems, GTC Water, Priority Power, C-Star, and then yesterday, Chem Stations and Data Core for Flexpo Plus. I want to thank everybody who is here. We get a lot of people coming back to the forum, particularly grateful to them for the support. Thank you again. We'll hopefully see you next year. We're going to have the conference on February 7th and 8th next year. You can register today if you wanted to. But thank you again, and let's give the panel a hand again.